technology and let that lead us right into our presentation. Melvin Tidwell was born in Lakeland, Florida. Mel lived on a small family farm. He was a dedicated musician throughout his school years. He joined the Navy at age 18. After submarine training in Groton, Connecticut, Mel was stationed on a submarine in Hawaii. After 10 years in the Navy, Mel left the Navy and started working for Lockheed Martin. Mel traveled the world as an engineer working on Navy ships in the U.S. and abroad. He left Lockheed in 1996. In 1997, he worked as a boiler technician at Yellowstone National Park. After driving across the U.S. a few times, Mel took a job with Gulfstream Aerospace in Savannah, Georgia. He eventually turned to Lockheed in Huntsville, Alabama in 2003. There he met his now spouse, John Pruitt, who is our pianist and music director. Mel retired from Lockheed in 2017 and moved with John to their home in Blue Ridge. Mel now spends his time cooking, gardening, cleaning, and taking care of John and their two super hunting Norwegian elk hounds, Rags and Bo, the two protectors of the gardens and all-around scoundrels. Thanks to the support, love, and encouragement from our congregation to take his stories a step further, Mel applied and was added to the pulpit directory as a UU layperson for the UUA Southern Region. This will enable him to spread his message at other UUA churches throughout the South. Mel.
Deep breath. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. First, I want to say how happy I am to be back speaking to you all, and you give me the comforting space to express myself as I've never really been able to do before. So thanks. As John indicated last year during the annual UU congregation meeting, everyone that spoke was required to introduce themselves like this. My name is Melvin Cassidy Tidwell. I am a cisgender gay white male. I am 63 years old. I weigh 170 pounds and am 5 feet 7 inches tall. I have thinning strawberry blonde hair with the same color goatee. I have on brown glasses and I am wearing tan pants and an Irish green t-shirt overlaid with my new Hawaiian print shirt John bought me for my birthday. My pronouns are he, him, girl, child, honey, himbo, sister, and Miss Thing. I say this all in jest to relieve a little tension, but using the pronouns as people wish to be addressed is no laughing matter. For those that don't yet know, cisgender means you identify with the sex you were born. So even though I am as gay as the disco ball we bring out at the North Georgia Mountain Big Gay Potlucks, I am a man. I see and feel myself to be that outwardly, but more importantly, all the way to my inner self-being. I have no doubts or desires to be anything else. It seems that this issue keeps slapping me in the face as if to say, talk about me. From interactions with friends in other areas to disagreements with a woman at a cabin in Gatlinburg back in April. Transgender, it's about the children, save the children. I began writing this months ago, and then I made a trip back to my hometown of Lakeland, and I rented a car and drove what was normally a 9 to 10 hour drive that turned into 14 hours, and it was a long day. During the drive down and back, I listened to conservative talk radio. the entire trip. Even though it was troubling, I listened because I believe we all have to listen. One particular broadcast has some man raging about pronouns. He seems to be carrying the torch of its proper grammar to call someone by the pronoun of the sex they were at birth. A dadgum grammar lesson. It was like I was back in 1976 when that Schoolhouse Rock video first appeared. Listening to him raging about others he knows nothing about added a whole new layer onto my thoughts, and it's my reflections on this that brought my story today. So what's in a pronoun? And more importantly, why does it matter to us as Unitarian Universalists? The World Health Organization defines gender identity as a person's deeply felt, internal, and individual experience of gender, which may or may not coincide to the person's physiology or designated at birth. We, as UUs, have a dichotomy within our culture. Many of us are elder people that have become accustomed to our way of life, which, as a generality, do not like change. We find technology confusing at times, and I often hear and discuss with others the things that are changing around us. It is not an American thing to feel this way. It is a human thing. From Turkey to Hong Kong to Saudi Arabia to Sydney, it's always with the change. On our UUA.org website, there is a reflection on the first principle, and it states, reverence and respect for human nature is at the core of Unitarian Universalist faith. We believe that all the dimensions of our being carry the potential to do good. We celebrate the gifts of being human, our intelligence and capacity for observation and reason, our senses, our intelligence and creativity, our feelings and our emotions. We cherish our bodies as well as our souls, and we can use our gifts to offer love, to work for justice, to heal injury, and to create pleasure for ourselves and for others. Rabbi Abraham Heschel wrote, "Just to be is a blessing. Just to live is holy." Unitarian Universalists affirm the inherent worth and dignity of each person as a given of faith. An unshakable conviction calling us to self-respect and respect for others. The UU faith has a rich and enduring mission of inclusion and acceptance, a mission that is carried out in deed and in service. The two religious movements of Unitarianism and Universalism combined back in 1961. Each individually had a long path of reform and social institutions in their past. They had become home for what we are: friends, lovers, community activists, abolitionists, feminists, forward thinkers, gay liberationists, family. It was way back in 1970 when our combined faith was the first religion that officially condemned discrimination against homosexuals. In 1989, the UUA launched a welcoming congregation program to support churches that proactively become more inclusive of LGBTQ community. We at Mountain Light affirm ourselves as a welcoming congregation every Sunday. It is part of our soul. There are no unwanted in this space. At the organizational level, a good example of Unitarian outreach is the Mattachine Foundation that was created back in 1950 and 51. It was started by Harry Hay, a gay activist, Reverend Wallace de Ortega Maxey, the Unitarian minister of the First Universalist Church of Los Angeles, and Universalist Bob Hull and Chuck Rowland. The Mattachine Society was a secret homophile organization that believed homosexuals should see themselves as an oppressed minority entitled to equality. Now, here we are, 2 decades into the 21st century. These beginnings of universalist activism and social leadership gave me personally more than I could ever speak about here. They were the spark that began the flames of my freedom. It instilled in me the courage to finally walk in my own skin and tell the world who I am. To stand before you and speak with honesty and compassion that I did not have even 10 short years ago. Now, we as gay men, we throw pronouns around like beads at Mardi Gras. We change the inflection in our voices and we call each other girl with a U. We address each other as honey or sister. For a long time now, us queers and gender questionable have switched our use of gender pronouns so that we could openly communicate with one another in times when it was not safe to openly have relationships. During my research, I found this practice is sometimes called sheeing. It has a centuries-long history around the world, including England, Peru, South Africa, and right here in America. We call each other she or girl because it was historically a way of protecting ourselves as well as building community in the context of homophobic and violent mainstream culture. In the 1940s, military censors were on the lookout for evidence of homosexuality which could provoke an investigation. There's that lavender scare I spoke about again. But to evade this, soldiers would shift the pronouns in their letters sent back home. I remember back in the mid-1990s, I was out of the U.S. Navy and a free civilian. I had come out to family almost a decade before, but I was struggling with my outward appearance of being gay. I was living in Mission Beach, San Diego with a man named Newton. During this so-called relationship, I changed. I didn't totally shut out my friends, but began to feel my outward queerness, and I always felt this around Newt. I didn't feel manly enough. He and I were flying around the country, rock climbing and hiking. We rappelled the cliffs around Southern California, but we also went out to bars and danced together under the stars on Puka Shell Beach in Hawaii. It was during this time that I told my best friend Ray, who is with us again on Zoom from Texas, hey girl, hey. I told him to stop calling me girl. See, Newton was gay to his core, but could walk through life without anyone knowing it. He had zero outward gayness. His speech, his walk, his voice, everything was hyper-masculine. One New Year's, our pack decided to spend the celebratory night in Tijuana, and I remember the waiter telling us we all looked gay except for Newton. I look back at the male I was then, and he doesn't live here anymore. Back then, I was walking around trying to display a masculine, straight life, all while trying to create a loving relationship with another man. It all sounds so ridiculous when I say it out loud, but therein lies the basis of me speaking to you about it today. Beneath my flippant discourse is the blood of pronouns. I always knew I was a man, he, him. The first transgender person I fully remember was in 1990. I had left the Navy and began my civilian career with Unisys, which is now Lockheed, and the home office was on Long Island in Great Neck, New York, right across from the Long Island Jewish Hospital. The first all-hands meeting I attended was in an auditorium, and I saw her there. Today, I say her, but back then it was definitely something derogatory. I was a new employee, just out of the Navy. I had seen a lot of things by this point. I had traveled the globe. I had been to the bars in Subic Bay, Philippines, and seen the debauchery conducted inside, and I have known of drag shows, but wasn't a big fan. Androgyny was a part of the 1980s new wave culture that I was engrossed in during those first remarkable years of freedom from my parents and joining adulthood. But I had never seen a transgender person outside of the gay environment. It had always been over cocktails and weed. Talk about another moment in time if I could change it. I didn't engage her or do anything to degrade her. I just didn't acknowledge her. No one acknowledged her, except to point her out from the sides of their mouth. I wish now I could see her again and acknowledge her and maybe even blow her a kiss. You know, as the great American philosopher and activist Angela Davis said, the thing about knowledge is the more you learn, the more you realize there is to learn. And here today, in the new century, there has been a transitioning in reason throughout the world. The technology emerging has brought us a window into the many aspects of us claiming ourselves. Straight, gay, cross-dressers, transsexuals, drag queens, bisexuals, unknowns, and still to comes. Those of us in my generation could never have imagined these words would be spoken out loud, and especially not in a church environment. But that is the core of our faith. Stepping into the fray of human rights and leading struggles throughout the world to make a safe space for all humans, not just gay rights. Our churches have been beacons of light during so many worldwide upheavals. In the Harvard Divinity School Library, which is the home of the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee archives, it says in 1939, the Reverend Waitstill Sharp, a Unitarian minister in Wellesley, Massachusetts, and his wife Martha, a social worker, traveled to Prague to investigate reports of a humanitarian crisis. From these two gracious Unitarians' humble but brave beginnings, the Unitarian Service Committee was born. During and after World War II, the Service Committee assisted countless displaced persons in Europe. They distributed food and clothing. They established hospitals and homes for children. They provided aid to hundreds of people in their efforts to escape Europe and establish new lives in the United States. Waitstill and Martha did all this during a time when our American government and to a large extent population were anti-Semitic. There was no appetite in our country to rescue the Jews of Europe or of Northern Africa. The First Unitarian Church in Louisville, Kentucky hosted Susan B. Anthony and Carrie Chapman Catt way back in January of 1895 during their tour of the South to promote women's suffrage. ARCA is an organization located in Kremenchuk, Ukraine, and was founded in 2018. ARCA's mission is to promote the reinterpretation and change of perception of the image of the Roma community in Ukrainian society. Located just down in Floresville, Texas for years, the Carrizo Comecrudo tribe of South Texas has defended their lands from the triple threat of militarization, desecration, and environmental racism. In 2019, they took the administration to court, resisting the government's efforts to run a border wall through the heart of a local cemetery. More recently, they faced down corporate attempts to build liquefied natural gas export terminals on the lands of their ancestors, and they won. Through the Unitarian Service Committee partnership, the tribe is able to continue its fight. John and I personally have marched through the streets of Blue Ridge with many in our congregation. We had to let our voices be heard when children were being put in cages and removed from the only love they knew. In 2022, the UUA submitted an amicus brief decrying Alabama's SB 184 bill, which criminalized gender-affirming health care for transgender youth. Friends, as technology changes, we must change as well. As we work our way through the age of information and technology overload, I remember my mother telling me she would never own a microwave or a dishwasher. If it hadn't been for my sister moving in and taking care of her after Daddy died, her entire diet would have come from a microwave. Anyway, as we see these acceptances spread around the world, I say let our eyes stay on the goal and not the skirmishes. Do not let the naysayers calling us woke corral us into the war. We must lead the way to the future. Maybe some other discussion, I will tell you how I believe we are all time travelers. But I've mentioned before that I really think we humans have advanced physically as far as we can. And yes, I know we keep jumping further and swimming faster, but we cannot fly, we cannot transmutate into other shapes. I believe our future lies in our ability to accept the changes and the capacity we possess to expand the consciousness of humanity. Our Unitarian faith is the next evolution. It has to be for humanity to survive. The ideal of equality and respect for every human is the only way I see us not de-evolving into hatred and destruction. As I envision our next generations, 2 or 3 down the line, I hope these current day issues will be part of the stain of history. Because the actual facts are that we have no idea what is in our own personal future, much less the future of humanity as a whole. That's yet to be determined. Heck, some androgynous cat species could land on this rock in 50 million years and find my DNA. Of course, they would see me, roll their eyes, knock something off the planet, then look at each other and say, "Girl, please." So in closing, I will be honest. I cannot speak to you as a genderqueer person. I have no way to express the feelings of the trans person down the road. My heart is with the transgender children of this congregation and the past members, but I have no way to speak on their behalf because I don't fully understand myself. But my hope is today you feel the spirit of Nex Benedict, a 16-year-old who was transgender and used the pronouns he, him. He died from suicide on February 8th, a day after a fight at his high school. He had told his mother that he faced bullying at school over his gender identity. Then there's Charlie Millers, a 17-year-old trans boy who killed himself on a mental health ward because he felt worthless and could not think of anything positive to say about himself shortly before he died. Charlie had been bullied at school and misgendered by health care in the 5 years up to his death, and he struggled with his mental health. Now, I could spend hours telling you the stories of these and others because the list is pretty endless. But instead, I will tell you what I have come to know personally. It's that what is contained in that pronoun is pain. It's surviving the years of being called a sissy or tomboy and then berated further whenever you step into that persona. It is the years of work to find yourself, the rejection of the parent that doesn't understand, the unguided wade through the emotions of becoming a person no one expected you to become. It's the years of therapy, the diagnosis of gender dysphoria, the lifelong endless consumption of hormone therapies, the painful surgeries to cut through skin and bone to become what the soul is telling them. It's the struggle within to not just get it over with and end it all with a pill or a bullet. It's the little boy that wants to be called Melissa when playing with his sister. But I'd like to share a poem. It's by a young poet named Alenka, and it's called The Boy Within. You stare at the mirror, shift your gaze aside, the curve of your chest a pain you can't hide. You pull your shirt tight, seeking to erase the form that feels foreign, a body misplaced. With bandages in hand, you wrap yourself tight, breath held in silence for a fleeting respite. Comfort in the bind, though it constrains a small price to pay to feel right again. Guilt whispers softly, a shadow in your mind, the body you've worn so hard to leave behind. But this skin, this flesh doesn't align with the truth that you feel deep inside. Your hair so long, a crown of soft threads, your mother's pride, but a weight on your head, a silent apology as the scissors come near, each snip a release, a shedding of fear. Strands fall like whispers settling at your feet, a symbol of the past, of the change you seek. The scissors clatter down, your heart starts to race as you lift your eyes to meet the mirror's face. And there he is, the boy who always hid behind the layers of skin of expectations undid. A beautiful man, standing tall and true. In the reflection, you see the real you. As I read this over and over, I began to feel the layers peel away for him. I found hope in knowing that I would see the real man he had become. No longer the reflection of her, no longer the expectations undid. But this does not have to end on a sad note. Make the ending a joyous one. Recognize their spot. See them as the person they are, not the person you remember. Allow each individual that happy moment of knowing you are their friend as Michaela, just as you were their friend as Mike. That moment of recognition and acceptance may be the moment that saves them. Just that one little word. He, him. She, her, they, them. just a few microseconds in time, but it will be in their hearts forever. All of these things I mention are realities, hard truths that so many are doing their best to survive. I am not their voice. I have my own survival story. Today, I am just here to remind us that our UU principles command us to respect the dignity of every person. Our liberal faith compels us to acknowledge the journey of every straight, queer, gender-neutral, gender-binary, transgender person. But our humanity demands it from us. Thank you.